Good morning and welcome to Jew in the City Speaks with your host, Allison Josephs, also known as Jew in the City. When we bring guests onto the show to interview them, usually I don't know them very well. Today's guest is someone who, first of all, you've heard from her before. I interviewed her a few years ago, actually at the start of the pandemic. She is a Makom member named Nechama Schweitzer, and we have some really exciting news to announce now, which is that she is the first Makom member who has now turned into a staff member. So Nechama started her journey with us several years back. She is a tremendously courageous, hardworking, incredible woman, and she has come so far along in her own journey that it seemed to make perfect sense to bring her in now to start really kind of giving back now and helping people that are fresher on the journey, newer to the struggle, guidance, wisdom, and really hope for what the path ahead could look like when you have the courage to confront this stuff. So, Nechama, thank you so much for being here today and just being you every day.
Thanks for having me.
So,
part of life, I guess.
We spoke in March, 2022 or March 2020 or April 2020. We spoke right after Unorthodox came out. That film came out at the beginning of the pandemic, and people were just glued to their screens and just having a blast watching how bad Hasidic Jews are. And I wanted you to come on then to give some nuance to the story of what it is like to, experience challenges in the Hasidic community and also not give up your connection to being Jewish. So there's a longer version of your story that people can find elsewhere on our YouTube channel, on our site. We'll post a link for that. But if you could give us, on one foot, al regel achas, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? How and when did you find yourself no longer able to be part of that community?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a Jewish community in Brooklyn. I went to a Hasidic school, straight through high school, graduated from Hasidic school. I knew right away that I did not want to have kids or get married, but that was kind of expected of me. And when a shidduch came up, I just went into it because I thought that was the right thing for me to do. And that's what I was supposed to do. I was married for a very brief time. That was about when I was 20. I got divorced very soon after. I stayed and lived by myself. That's what I always wanted to do. I was focused on my career and the special ed field. And I stayed in the community and pretended that this is what I wanted, and I was going with the flow for a couple of years until about the age of 25, when I found that this double life that I was living, the things that I really wanted on the inside, did not match what I was showing other people. I had to pretend that I wanted to get married right away and have kids again. And that's not what I wanted. And I think the pretense is what really was the last straw. And I fell into a deep depression. And it was at that time that I left my community. And at that time, a couple of months later, is when I also found you guys, Makom, and started my journey of rediscovering Judaism, relearning everything that I have learned.
So when you joined Makom, I think it was around 6 years ago, you were kind of really in a low point in your life, but you still, as you mentioned before, you were kind of missing Shabbos or doing something on Shabbat to some extent. And so you reached out to a mental health professional that you knew who told you about our program director, Zeldi, who sets people up for Shabbos. So your initial sort of entry point into Makom started with Shabbos placements and sort of getting to know host families. We spent the first interview talking a lot about your experience in the Hasidic community. And, now that you've come on as a staff member, I want to spend this time talking about the healing journey, because we hear so much about people rejecting being Jewish, rejecting being Hasidic. And it's so important to talk about What does that look like for people who choose to do this? What does it look like to rebuild when the Jewish upbringing did not go, maybe as it could have, or in a way that was working? So tell us about your Shabbos placements when you joined Makom. What did you experience? How was it different than what you had known, Judaism to be up until that point?
Yeah. So I joined Shabbos placement because I just had this like yearning from inside to just experience Shabbos. And the only way I can explain it is just like my Jewish soul was just like yearning for something. So I went to a couple of families, and what I saw was completely different from the way I was raised. Um, from like interactions between like parents and their children, the interactions between guests that were over there, the way that, a Shabbos meal was conducted. It just, it was something I've never seen before. It was something that to me, I remember thinking like, where have you guys been all my life? Like this was something that I was looking for that I've never seen.
What was appealing about it?
Sorry?
What was appealing about the new type of Shabbos interactions and, sort of the vibe going on in Shabbos that you hadn't seen before?
So there was a lot of just connection between parents and their children, between family members and like guests. These are, I grew up where like the women sat on one side of the table, the men sat at the other side of the table. A Shabbos meal was, all about like supposed to be talking about Torah and like holy stuff. It was like mostly the men who were in charge of leading, so to speak, the meal. And the women were just like on the other hand, we just had like small conversations. We didn't contribute much. And all of a sudden, what I experienced is like one happy family of like, parents hugging their kids. Also, again, like something I've never really experienced, especially like from my dad, but like just parents coming home from shul and the kids just like running over to hug them and get, exchange like kisses and good Shabbos. I saw just like men and women just sitting together having casual conversation. That was something I, again, never experienced before. There was a certain joy and love and connection that I felt that was missing from my Shabbos experiences growing up.
I just want to interject now, just because, the more that I've learned in the journey, the Makom journey, and then from the other Hasidic Jews that I've met that have stayed in the community, when people speak about, kind of what they see or experience, if something is going on sort of in your family or within sort of the circle of friends that you keep, that doesn't necessarily speak for the larger Hasidic world or other Hasidic families. And so I think that's important, that although the families that you visited were, not Hasidic, there are Hasidic families where there's affection and it's more of a chill vibe. That just wasn't your experience. So I think that, I just want to kind of make that clarification because I'm sure we have Hasidic people listening now on YouTube who is a different type. Your family wouldn't have watched YouTube, and so that in itself is a distinction, is a nuance.
Yeah, I'll also add that not every person that grows up Hasidic like needs what I was looking for. Some people are happy with their family and the dynamics, and they feel the joy and the connection in the way that they're raised. For me, for some reason, that was not enough. And it just, I was willing to give it all up because it just didn't mesh with who I was and my ideas of what I wanted of life. So, even within family dynamics, you can have different siblings who just, choose a different lifestyle.
Totally. Okay, so the first thing was sort of the eye-opening experience of, I think, just a different sort of emotional vibe and sort of seeing Shabbos and holidays practiced in a way that felt so different because the energy in the home and the interactions between family and guests were so different than what you were used to. So I would say sort of the first component was kind of this just like new emotional awareness of how people could approach, Judaism differently than what you had experienced. And I feel like some of the intellectual conversations started at that point for you. and then you started going to Makom events. And I want to segue into the intellectual part of the Makom events and the classes, that we hold. What did that journey look like in terms of getting to finally ask your questions? How were your questions treated in your upbringing growing up versus your experience in Makom events?
Yeah, I mean, I had so many questions. I had so many questions just about God and who God is. I had questions about like, what's the big deal about being Jewish? Why would I want to be Jewish? For a very long time, I felt like it was such a big burden to be Jewish, and I have all these like laws and customs and things that I just have to do by default, because I was just born Jewish. I think back home, if I were to ask these questions, actually never dared. I think I was way too scared to ask questions. I asked questions, very like subtle questions in terms of like, questioning different like customs that we have in terms of like dressing, dress codes, and like the responses I would get would just be like, this is the holiest way to live, and just suck up your feelings, and it doesn't matter what's in style or what culture said. Um, so those were like the only questions I asked back at home. But once I started taking classes and I had a place, even I would say even at like people's houses, I started asking questions. Um, and it was like any question went, whatever question I had, I was able to ask. None of it was judgmental. Um, every host I went to, every class I went to, nobody would try to convince me of something. No one would try to like change my mind. It was more about people sharing their perspective, and what they know about Judaism. A lot of, especially in classes, I would say a lot of rabbis and just people who gave classes would bring different sources that I had never heard of, different concepts and philosophies that I just like have never learned about it. And I kind of challenged a lot. I did a lot of back and forth questioning until I feel like I, heard enough different perspectives. And maybe I'm jumping ahead here, so you can interject, but I do feel like at some point things started like settling down for me. And I've because I've gotten enough information, um, from very different perspectives and sources, I was able to kind of figure out what works for me and which ones felt right for me. And it wasn't like this one size fits all mentality where it's like, this is what you believe, this is what we do, and everybody's just got to do that.
You expressed something to me. There was a recent class that we had where we invited kind of the newer crop, because at Makom we kind of have different, almost like generations of people who come in and spend their time, bonding with fellow members and, going to classes. It was a newer crop that was on a class about a lot of controversial issues. And you wrote to me, there's so many people burning with questions, and I don't feel that anymore. Like you said, I'm sure I still have a million questions, but I think you stopped feeling burdened by your questions, right? There was a point kind of in your development where the questions kind of stopped sort of troubling your heart in the same way. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, very much so. I think, and I remember that event. I think I've learned that there isn't like, like that the world is not black and white. And I used to say it's like shades of gray. But then I saw one of your videos about like some artist, and now I like to say it's shades of the rainbow, because I feel like the world in Torah is so beautiful and colorful. And there's so many different ways to understand like literally every single thing. And there's so much depth to Judaism and Torah, that, the things that bother me, I know that I can explore it. I know that even if I don't have the perfect answer, I can still be a good person. I can still be a good Jew and be loved and accepted, despite the fact that I don't have an exact answer to everything. It's a certain like peace I came to.
Love it. Another piece I want to get through quickly, and then I want to get to like my final question. Makom community, where the way we do things now, because you were one of our earlier members, we kind of just started setting up people for Shabbos right away. our new way of doing things is that we spend time getting to know the member, and now we set them up for Shabbos once we've gotten to know them better. But you kind of did things backwards. You met a lot of families first, and then I convinced you, just go to some events, Nechama, just meet other people. So what was that process like of, finding community amongst other seekers who had, been through your background and were also kind of looking to try to find their path?
It was so powerful. It was so encouraging um, to know that there are other people on this journey before. Unfortunately, a lot of people who leave the community, leave it on Judaism, and I knew that was not my path. Before I joined Makom, I haven't met other people who were on a similar journey as me. And that just having that community of people who understand you and are with you on the same journey, encourage you and support you, it it's so powerful. It's so hard to do it alone. I don't think anybody should do it alone or is meant to do it alone. And the support it's everything.
I think, so much of what Makom members experience is a lack of acceptance. It's a lack of acceptance, at home, from, leaders, teachers, a lack of self-acceptance. And I think, what the community, what we try to create is a community of acceptance, and for people to be able to come with their authentic self and their authentic questions, obviously within boundaries, because, there's still, we still have to live together in a community and be careful about how we treat other people. But otherwise, I think acceptance is such an important sort of dynamic that we want to create within Makom. And then just the last piece, and I would say, I think in terms of the work that you've done and my seeing the healing that you've done, is something that we've spoken about here on this show and on JewInTheCity.com on numerous occasions, which is inner child work, which, my eyes got open to a couple of years ago, based on this book called The Emotionally Absent Mother, The Invisible Effects of Childhood Emotional Neglect by Jasmine Lee Corey. She's a non-Jewish therapist, psychologist. She wrote about childhood emotional neglect, which I'll just give a little intro to, and then I want to hear kind of what this process did for you. We're not a mental health organization, but we do try to bring mental health ideas into the programming that we do, since there are so many mental health issues, that are part of kind of this journey. So what Jasmine Lee Corey talks about is that when a child's emotional needs are met, they grow up feeling seen, held, heard, like they have a place they can go to and turn to for help. We think about neglect for physical needs as making sure our kids are fed and are clean and get enough sleep, but there's a whole set of emotional needs that human beings need. And if a person is raised with childhood emotional neglect, a severe enough amount, they will not know how to give this over to the next generation unless they stop and do this education. And that's a big reason why we talk about this a lot. I just want to clarify that none of this is meant to, project any judgment onto parents or how they raise their children. People can only do better when they educate themselves, and sometimes that requires sort of stopping and listening and hearing, reflecting on the dynamics that you may have been raised with, that you may be raising your kids with right now. And these are things that can be, worked on and changed and corrected even once the child grows. So Jasmine Lee Corey's sort of, thesis is that you can heal this childhood emotional neglect through good mother messages. And it's essentially self-parenting and telling your inner child, which are different stages that continue to live inside of you, whether it's, a 4-year-old that needs to just be held or a 14-year-old that needs to scream. What ends up happening is that you can tell these inner children inside of you, I see you, I hear you, you can turn to me for help, I'll make time for you, you can rest in me. And by giving the child the messages that she's missing, these different children within the person can, kind of do the healing and kind of be part of the past, kind of by having their needs met, as opposed to, sort of continuing to trouble the adult self. What I realize is that these different good mother messages seem so true that they must be in the Torah. And I kind of just did a quick Google search, and one by one, I found each of these good mother messages in different Jewish sources. So with that long introduction, Nechama, how long had you been in therapy for when I told you about this book that I was reading that I thought might, be relevant to the Makom journey?
Many years. I must have been in therapy probably for like 7 years at that point. I mean, I've gone through a lot. So like a lot of my years of therapy was just about managing my day-to-day life. Um, and then it really wasn't until like, the past couple of years where it just felt like I was kind of stuck, where I just like I wasn't feeling like I was moving along and healing in a way that I kind of wanted to. My past just kept coming up for me, and I just wasn't able to face it. And every time I would just like spiral out, and I would have to stop. Which was when you actually started, and you told me about the inner child work, and I brought it to my therapist, who I have to say I have to give her a lot of credit, because she had never really heard of that concept, but she just took it. And she kind of went on, started this new journey with me of going back in time and remembering just different events in my life, or just different moments in my life in the past and also now in the present, where really what I needed and what I need right now, it's like kind of doing like the past and the present at the same time, where there are moments when either what I needed or what I need is just someone to validate my feelings, somebody to turn to talk to about what I was going through, someone to just check in with me and say, hey, I got your back. I'm here with you. You're not alone. And growing up, I did feel very alone. I never spoke about my feelings. It wasn't ever talked about or encouraged. I didn't know how to handle my feelings, really. I would go for days without talking when I had like these big feelings, and I just couldn't get out of it. So this concept of like being, having like a parent, even if you don't actually have a parent, but me showing up for myself, or either the younger me or the me now, and being able to validate her and tell her she's not alone, and tell her that she's, I'm here for you, and I'm going to support you through whatever you're going through. And no matter what, I accept you, and I love you. That was and is like something that continues to be a tremendous asset for me. I want to also say it's almost like a coping skill for me at this point, when I find myself in situations where like I'm just like sobbing or in so much pain, or like I wish my mom was here to hug me and tell me that I'm okay and that I'm not alone. I can stop myself and I can say like, okay, this is the time when I have to bring in that parent for myself, and I can do that and say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm holding you. I can love you. And I want to jump onto what you said, where you found the sources in the Torah that actually is God, giving us those mother messages. To me, that was so powerful. I remember once when I was, reliving some past experiences, and I was just like crying like so much. And I was just like trying to like find something in me to like soothe myself. And all of a sudden I did feel like I felt God was just there, and he was giving me these messages and telling me, I'm here for you. I love you. And I know whatever is going on right now is so painful, but you're not alone. The trend is definitely not over. I think, there's still a ways to go for me, but I feel like right now I have a tool, I have a skill that is so powerful, and has helped me make the progress that I haven't made in so long. And I use it like really all the time. Even when I'm not dealing with past experiences, when I'm dealing with, just day-to-day life events, it's almost like I can show up for myself and be there for myself. Something I never like really understood. I realized this like recently. I never really understood what that means to like really show up for yourself. But now that I've learned how to like self-parent and I've learned what these mother messages really mean, I just feel like I'm there and I got myself, and it's a tremendous gift you've introduced me to, and that I now have that is it's very powerful and very, very helpful.
Zeldy, our program director, had actually been talking about this for years in her own words, and I didn't quite understand. She would say, give yourself compassion. So it was definitely a message that was floating around. I just found the language that Jasmine Lee Corey uses in this book to be so descriptive and fit into so many patterns of what I had seen with Makom members. I think the point of finding the sources in different parts of the Torah, Talmud, Tehillim, is that this is what we're supposed to feel about ourselves coming down from on high. And due to many different reasons, for some parents, they were not raised with these good mother messages, to not talk about anyone specifically. In the Jewish community, from community, there's a lot of Holocaust survivors, certainly with, families decimated or going through, tremendous trauma. I would say also, I think in the Black community, when we say intergenerational trauma, like these are the things we're talking about where there's just so much pain that comes down through family lines that parents don't know how to give over these feelings or these qualities or this safety and security to their children. And that's why talking about it is so important. It's why, let's just be honest, doing this work is really painful. I've heard so many people express a sense of shame of having to be their only person for themselves. It's a really hard thing to kind of get yourself over, of saying like, I will be there for me, even if you may feel ashamed that I'm the only one that I have in this way. But Nechama, kol hakavod to you that you've persisted and you've given yourself, I think it's really a toolbox because the journey's not over, but you have the tools now of what to do when, you face the challenges. And that's exactly why we brought you on now as a staff member at Makom, so that you can, I think, help other members feel comfortable, give themselves permission to give to themselves like that. So we're nearly out of time, but if we have just a closing thought to anyone listening now who may have been raised, in a Jewish home that didn't fit, in a home where they didn't feel like they belonged. And I guess give us an update also on your thoughts now about marriage and children.
Right. So for a very long time, I didn't want to have kids or get married. I think that was mostly because I saw the world as such a dark, horrible place to be. And why would I want to give that to anybody else? And my view has done a complete 180, thanks to you and thanks to so many other people at Makom and not at Makom who have supported me in the past, now still and in the past, that it's, I would love to get married. I would love to have a family. And to all of those who are still in the community or do need the support or feel like life is not what you want it to be, come and find Makom, come and find you in the city. There's hope. There really is. And there's support. I feel like the biggest thing is to know that you're not going to be alone. You don't have to be alone. Makom is here for you. And like Allison said, one of the biggest things is acceptance. And at Makom and the family and the host I've been to, it's just, there's so much love and there's so much acceptance. It takes a lot of courage to take that jump. You don't have to just leave right away, but just come and get some support, see what we have to offer. You can take it or leave it. No pressure. It's a good place to be.
I mean, and we kind of feel like a little like parents to the Makom members because we're a bit of a family, and it's really the biggest bracha for parents to get nachas from their children, and the entire staff feels, and so many hosts feel so much nachas from from you and your bright light and your courage and your strength. So keep on shining, Nechama. And thank you so much, and see you at the next staff meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And you can catch us same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.